Welcome again. This is Joy Rose on behalf of Pastor G, introducing and welcoming you to another episode of our Forward Moving Focus podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Special treat again today. We have Pastor G talking with attorney Andrew Wignall. Wignall. See, I practiced offline.
Well, I appreciate that.
We're going to turn the mic over to Pastor G. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sister Joy. I know I'm probably a little louder. I turned off some of the noise so they could hear us. And certainly we appreciate you for coming and taking some time. We're going to push this out a little later on so that more people can gain access to this. Are you familiar with kind of what we're doing here on the corner?
Yes, I know this is at least your second time here on the corner at 29th, 30th, and MLK. And
right.
Yes.
And I want to be clear, because a lot of people have asked the question, what's the difference between 2015 and 2017? And your presence here today really signals what the real difference is, and that is about making sure that we use this space that you're sitting in, we call this the epicenter, to provide empowerment through information and education, even through intake for people who really need some information to actually move forward with their lives or in their community, to engage in their community. And so the role that the prosecutor's office plays in the community, I'm not sure everyone is totally clear on. I think when you hear the word prosecutor, you think prosecution.
Correct, yeah.
And that does not always ring well in the community. So
it's not warm and fuzzy, is it?
You are the deputy prosecutor, so you're not Terry Curry, you're not prosecutor.
Correct.
You are the deputy prosecutor. Can you not only talk about the office, but talk about the relationship between people see Terry Curry on TV, they say, okay, and what that relationship's in hierarchy, and talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having us, first of all. We appreciate coming out and be able to do these kinds of things in the community. As you mentioned, a lot of times people just hear the word prosecutor or prosecution and they think of a courtroom downtown in the city-county building.
Right.
Us as prosecutors, telling the judge that everybody needs to go to jail for 100 years and that sort of thing. But that is not what obviously we go to court as prosecutors. We're here to keep the community as safe as possible. We work with all different police agencies and the community to do that. One of the things that I know Terry Curry is very proud of, and myself as well, is our community prosecution division, which I'm a part of. Each one of the police districts around town, and there are 5 of them, there's a prosecutor and paralegal assigned to each of those offices. So on a day-to-day basis, what we do depends on what happened that day in the district. Some days I'm sitting at my desk working with detectives to screen and file criminal charges. Some days I'm going to Crime Watch meetings to talk about crime prevention. Some days I'm going to events like this to talk to anybody who wants to learn more about our office. Some days I'm going to do a talk at a school, like a career day, to talk to students about what their interests are, if they're interested in going into the law or something, and how they can do that down the road. So what I really like about my job is that every day is different. I never know who's going to be the other end of that phone when it rings, or what kind of email I'm going to get, and where I'm going to be headed, and what I'm going to be doing. But I can tell you that our office is very focused on trying to get out in the community and build better relationships with the community. And that's what we do in the Community Prosecution Division. Is we attend a lot of neighborhood meetings and community groups. In this area, we regularly attend the Highland Vicinity Neighborhood Association, Meridian Highland, Riverside Civic League. In the past, we've attended UNWA. We've been involved in the Quality of Life program down here along MLK. And so, we just want the community to know that we are here to help them. We're here to help them keep themselves safe as well. So it's a lot more than just going to court and quote-unquote prosecuting somebody for a crime. We'd prefer that no one ever made it to court. We'd prefer that we could stop crime before it happens.
Okay.
So it's a long answer to your question, but we as prosecutors do a lot of different things. We're kind of jacks of all trades, and we're very proud of what we do.
So what do you all see as the biggest challenge to making sure that people are clear about your role in preventing, prosecuting, or whatever, along that spectrum. What do you see as one of the broader challenges to actually accomplishing what you just described?
Yeah. I think initially it's difficult to maybe get your foot in the door sometimes. If we go to a new neighborhood association or a new crime watch group, they may be a little apprehensive about why we're there, what we're doing. And so it's really about building relationships with people and explaining to them, helping them with any problems they may be having in the neighborhood. Sometimes somebody will come up to you after a meeting, pull you aside and say, hey, they've been dealing drugs out of the house next to me for the last 6 months. I can't get any peace on my street, those kinds of things. Well, what I'll do is go right down the hall the next day to our narcotics detectives and talk to them about what's going on. And generally speaking, we're able to get something done with that right away. It's not a situation where I send an email off to somebody I may or may not know, or I tell that person I can't help them that's come up to me and asked for help. We're able to, because we are out in the police districts, out in the community, get that information firsthand from a resident, take that information to where it needs to go, and try to get something done. And I feel like over the years that I've been doing this, that is the best and easiest way to try to gain that trust and that relationship, is for people to see that we are here to help them. We're not here to hurt them. So
give me one of the assumptions, if you can rank the assumptions that people have, or the misconceived notions that people have, can you pick the number one assumption, or misconceived notion that people have that is just not true about what you all do and what your role is?
I think one of the big misconceptions is people assume either that we work for the police department or the police department works for us, and that's just not the case.
Really?
We're two separate agencies. The police department is run by the mayor and the chief of police, completely separate from our elected prosecutor is Terry Curry. So I think right off the bat, that is sometimes a hurdle that people just assume that we work for, or they work for us as police officers because they see us in court together, or they see the prosecutor on TV with the chief of police at a press conference or something like that. Obviously, we have to work with them very closely. I can't do my job without a police officer doing his or her job, and they can make all the arrests in the world, but nothing would happen to them if we weren't working hand in hand with them.
Gotcha. Now, because I do remember something came up maybe a year and a half ago or so, where I don't know what was really going on, but I know that there was this rumbling or background noise about some decisions that were being made, being politically, some political posturing or whatnot. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where people kind of assume that the decision to prosecute or to bring charges or whatever has something to do with, people's relationships? I'm assuming that that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say so. I think there's a general misconception that, politicians are going to do what they want because they're politicians. But, since Terry Curry's been in office, that has not been the case.
Okay. Is this like, Bill Clinton on the tarmac talking to to somebody, or the whole, lean in that Trump does with, is this kind of a very similar, we're in the same space doing what we do, but we're not supposed to sort of, cooperate with one another with certain things. We got to keep those things separate. Is it on that level?
I don't know about that. I mean, we as prosecutors, we have to follow the law. So, if facts dictate that we do something,
okay, let's just go there.
Okay.
Let's just go there. We have a situation in this community where a gentleman was police action shooting.
Yep.
I read in the paper that the chief of police has requested the FBI come in and assist in an investigation. He desires transparency. What role does your office play in a situation like that?
Correct. Yeah, there's several different routes that's going to take, obviously. Now that the federal and government is involved, they are doing their investigation. IMPD will do their own internal investigation to determine whether or not any of their policies were broken. And then there's also the criminal investigation done by the local authorities, meaning the prosecutor's
office. Is this concurrent or is this one after the other? Is
They're
that
all going on now, as I understand it.
Okay.
And
I understand it's an administrative investigation of some sort.
IMPD will do their own administrative investigation.
Wow.
However, in Indiana state law, anytime there's a police action shooting, all of those cases are referred to the grand jury. That the case will be referred to the grand jury at some point.
Okay.
Yes.
So what do you all have anything? I mean, I don't understand the legalese, so you got to help me. So what does your office have anything to do? Because this was in your district, am I correct?
Correct. It was on the northwest side, yes. But it'll be the central county or the main office grand jury will be handling it, yes.
Okay.
So,
what is it? I don't understand what that means. When the grand jury will be handling it, what does that have to do with you and them and Curry and...
Myself, I will not be involved in it. We have a grand jury division within our office where they have investigators, and we also have deputy prosecutors that work there. And the case will be presented to a panel of citizens that are in the grand jury.
Okay,
and they will determine whether or not there is enough there to file criminal charges.
Okay, so what we're doing is you're making a line of demarcation between the grand jury and a what would a different type of case be? It wouldn't go to the grand jury. It would go where?
A normal homicide case, for instance, would generally speaking go just to a regular criminal court.
Criminal court. There we go.
And be filed that way. It would come to our office by a police detective. They'd bring the case to us. Our office would decide if there's criminal charges to be filed, and then we'd put it in front of a judge.
Okay.
A grand jury, the investigation is done by grand jury detectives, separate from IMPD, separate from the sheriff's department. And then they bring that case and put it in front of a panel of citizens called the grand jury. And then they would decide whether or not criminal charges...
Where do those citizens come from?
Marion County.
Is this like a general, like you get the little thing in the mail says you got to go down and you go through that whole process?
Yeah, it's basically a jury duty summons to the grand jury, yes.
Okay.
But it'd be from Marion County.
Okay, and this is important because there are probably people out there assuming that as I'm asking you the question about something that happened in the district that, quote unquote, you represent, that they're going to assume, well, they said there's going to be this investigation. If they don't know, like I don't know the difference between those. So I'm hoping those who are watching and listening get that there's a difference between a homicide investigation of some sort of a citizen against a citizen, I'm assuming.
Correct.
And a police action shooting. There's a different chain that follows.
Correct. Definitely.
Okay. Great. Now, let's talk a little bit about, now that we've gotten some of the preliminaries out of the way, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that had been shared with us that I think are important to our community. And I hope you just tell me where you are with some of these things. Let's talk about trends relevant to this community that are either going in the right direction, going in the wrong direction, that we think people need to know about. What kind of trends are we seeing in communities like these that are either good, bad, or indifferent?
Yeah, I think crime in general has remained relatively even in most parts of the city, including the northwest side. We still see a huge issue with property crimes, so a lot of people's houses being broken into, cars being broken into. And we do see a lot of armed robberies these days, I believe. We see a lot of people who are coming back from somewhere, walking into their house, and they're being followed and being robbed at gunpoint a lot of times. We do see shootings as well, unfortunately, and not just in this neighborhood, but all throughout the Northwest District, unfortunately. We see it, and all throughout the city. So I wouldn't say that this neighborhood is experiencing anything that other parts of the county are not, specifically the area inside 465. But yeah, it's a concern to all of us that there's still property crime and violent crime taking place, for sure.
Now, okay, because one of the things I'm hearing is that we don't get enough people involved in helping to solve crime. So, an issue or whatever happens. So I'm wondering, for instance, we had a young lady, the mother came in here and said she was crying, she wanted prayer and all that, so we praying with her. Said, well, my daughter just called me because she got held up at gunpoint right over here at the gas station, right? For like $20 or whatever.
Yep.
From what I understand, they called IMPD. IMPD comes out, but this particular young lady didn't really feel like there was a lot of effort, and I understand, but this is IMPD. But I'm just trying to. This is seemingly a bigger deal around where you've got these incidents that happen. You get a phone call that's made. Somebody comes out. Then there's a question of, did we find the person? Do you see us having some challenges with actually prosecuting these crimes if we don't have cooperation from people? Or is that making sense?
Every day, it's a problem.
Is it a big problem? Is it a small problem? Is it a growing problem? Is it not that big of a deal? I mean, talk to us.
Yeah, I think it's a big problem. We see, in my job at least, nearly every day, we've got witnesses who don't want to cooperate for whatever the reason. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they just don't want to get involved. But yeah, we see that a lot. So, for instance, in that case, maybe it was a situation where there was a witness who saw what happened, decided not to stick around when the police were getting there, or told the police they didn't want to get involved. That makes our job so much more difficult. And one of the things we have seen, I think, grow in the last few years is people who are victims themselves who don't want to do anything. They don't want to use the traditional criminal justice system to solve the problem.
Why do you think that is?
I can't say for sure. I feel like there's a lot of times people want to take, quote-unquote, justice into their own hands, maybe handle it themselves. And I think, obviously, that's a very dangerous thing to do. But we see a lot of times where people are involved in shootings, police will get there. They will tell the police, yeah, they were shot. They know who it was, but they're not going to tell the police who it was. And believe it or not, that happens nearly every day. So it's very unfortunate, but that makes the job for a detective with IMPD very, very difficult. And ultimately, if we don't have a victim who's willing to cooperate or willing to tell us what happened, then we're not going to be able to file criminal charges down the line.
Okay. And so when you're making a determination of whether or not to file charges, these are the factors that come into play, I'm assuming.
Yes. All those.
How many? And I know I'm asking a probably too big of a question, but give me some of those basic factors that you're automatically kind of like, the A list of factors that you're looking for when deciding whether or not to file charges.
Yeah, one of the things we definitely look for is obviously corroborating evidence. So if somebody says something has happened to them or they saw something happen to somebody else, it's always best for us to have some sort of physical evidence. So if you have a shooting of some kind, if you have bullet holes or you have spent shell casings or the gun is recovered, or if a knife is involved and the knife is recovered. So those kinds of physical things are great. Pictures taken by IMPD when they get to the scene are great and very helpful to us. Statements from any victim or witness that saw what happened are always helpful. We look at whether or not somebody's been consistent. So sometimes it'll happen where an officer comes to a scene, they get one story from somebody. When a detective follows up either later that day or the next day, they get a completely different story. So then I'm sitting there trying to decide what really happened because we have two completely different statements. Or you've got two witnesses that have given completely different accounts of what has happened.
Do you have techniques or do you have a process for that? I mean, what do you do when you face a situation where you don't have corroborating evidence or someone is inconsistent? What's your next step?
Yeah, that makes it difficult. Sometimes I have to tell a detective or an officer to follow up and get more. Go back to the scene, try to find the bullet holes, try to find the shell casings, try to find the weapon. Sometimes I'll actually call up a victim or a witness myself before I file a case and just ask them, hey, the statement you gave to the first officer is different than the statement you gave to the detective. Which one's true? And sometimes, something will get lost in translation on the original account. Maybe the officer was interviewing 6 people at the same time,
right? And
you get a different answer than, what was actually given, was put in a report. So if I have inconsistencies, I try what I can to clarify that. And if we need more physical evidence, I always ask an officer or detective to try to follow up and get that information. Because if we're going to bring criminal charges against somebody, we want to make sure that somebody, beyond a reasonable doubt has done it, right? So I don't want to file charges against somebody if they haven't done something. I want to make sure that we could prove it in the court of law.
How long you been doing this?
Since 2004.
Okay, so you've been doing this quite a while. Mm-hmm. How do you keep from becoming cynical?
Cynical, yeah. Well, as prosecutors, that's one of the things on a daily basis we probably fight, and there are people in our office who
are frustrated.
Who don't stay for those kinds of reasons, and you see police officers who deal with the same kinds of things every day or get cynical and they leave because
it's not making sense. It's not
making
rational.
Sense. They may not feel like they're making a difference anymore. I feel like every day I get up and come to work, we're making a difference. Mm-hmm. Every day we put somebody dangerous away from a community to keep people safe. I think we're making a difference. So that's why I keep doing what I do.
Mm-hmm. Now there are instances where I have noticed some inconsistencies with regard to probable cause to do something, where somebody makes a phone call and says somebody did something, and because it looks strange doesn't necessarily mean that it is
correct
strange. How do you all is it in the laws or the statutes or whatever the heck that we're following that says that if I could pick up a phone call and I could call somebody and say, hey, I got somebody that just pointed a gun at somebody else. Mm-hmm. I think y'all need to come and get this person. Mm-hmm. And then you show up, somebody shows up, and they don't see a gun, but they got a phone call. I'm saying it's that person, whether that's true or not. I don't have the evidence, but now I'm here, and I guess I got to take that person down, and I guess at some point it shows up in your lap, and now you all have to, now this person who has been accused of something, whether it's really true or not, is kind of caught up in sort of a whirlwind situation. I know this is not a simple question, I get it, but this is kind of something that I think can rise to the level of a challenge within the community when you have the opportunity for something like this to happen. And I think the system begins to become abused by people who know how to use it against others, even if it's found to be untrue. Mm-hmm. Well, by the time you figure that out, the person has lost their job, we've wasted a lot of time, we spent a lot of taxpayer money, those kind of things. Is this a true scenario that I'm saying? And if so, what can we do?
Yeah, I'm sure it happens every day where people are calling, whether not they want to get somebody in trouble or. And
I'm not saying we don't want. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying we don't want, violent people off the street. I'm not saying that along. And we have this thing about weapons and guns, and we have this thing. And we need to deal with it. We need to be tough on crime, and I get that. Mm-hmm. But I think that seems like there may be some other little things at work here that I'm trying to understand.
Right. And it starts with that first officer that gets there. He or she's got to decide, using their training and experience, whether or not they think that story that's been told to them is true. So they have that ultimate first responsibility. And I know a lot of them are able to weed those things out. If they feel like it's a situation where they're not comfortable making arrests, they won't make an arrest. They will maybe take a report, have it assigned to a detective the next day for them to investigate it further. If they're unsure about something, if they're getting two different stories, then that's probably the way it should be handled. Now, that being said, there are still times where arrests are made and they cross my desk the next day, and I have to decide whether or not we think we have enough to file charges. And it's generally where I'll sit down with the detective, have that detective contact all the people, try to get all the stories, try to make sure we've got everything lined up. And our office really acts as a gatekeeper in that way. So we're kind of a check on an arrest. If a police officer makes an arrest, we are to look at it and decide whether or not we can go forward and file criminal charges. So the best answer I can give is that I have to look at all the things, all those factors we've already talked about,
Right.
to decide whether or not we think that was a good arrest. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I have to say, we don't have enough to file charges here, so we're going to not file criminal charges, let this person go. And, if there's more to it, if there's more to investigate, I'm happy to look at it again. So that does happen.
Yeah. And this is, to those who are watching and those who are listening, this is a concern that I have,
Yeah.
Especially in situations where we come to that designation or that, understanding, and yet we've kind of drugged this person through all this mayhem, if you will,
Yeah.
and then come to a conclusion. Okay, let's talk about narcotics. Can we? And I don't know. Do you have stats on the tip of your brain?
I do not have stats for you, but
You have a general sense.
I can talk to you about various things if you'd like. Yes.
Let's talk about the impact. We've talked about homicides, non-fatals, and things like that. We can talk about that. But let's talk about narcotics. What are we dealing with here?
If you ask my opinion, and this is my opinion, that drugs are the root of the majority of criminal activity, one way or another. People are breaking into cars and houses
Right.
to steal things to, fix their habit.
Yeah.
People are shooting people over narcotics for whatever reason.
Right.
So a lot of these crimes you'll see at the base root is some sort of narcotics-related activity.
Okay.
It's not just in this neighborhood. It is everywhere. Drugs are rampant. They really are. What we've seen a big explosion of the last couple of years, obviously, is heroin. And it affects all people, all walks of life, all races, all economic statuses, all parts of the city. And it has become a huge, huge problem. So
we're
saying heroin is...
So you're saying it's trending...
Yes. When you hear the phrase heroin epidemic, it really is anymore. And a lot of that stems from people who have been given prescription drugs.
The opioid
yes,
piece. Yeah.
And they become hooked on those drugs. And when their prescription runs out or they're cut back on for whatever reason, and they can't get it legitimately from a pharmacist or a doctor anymore, they're looking for how can they get that high. And heroin has been the route people have gone. And it is deadly. It is deadly.
Okay, so let's stay here for a hot second because we spend a lot of time in the media focusing in on blood. If it bleeds, it leads. It's one of the catchphrases that we've used in the media before. We spend a lot of time dealing with homicides and shootings and things like that. But in your estimation, what is our big issue? Is it homicides, or really is it the drug, the addiction and overdose? And talk to me.
I think that's a huge problem.
Which do you think is sort of leading our big challenge in these communities? Is it the homicides, or is it really the drug? I know that we don't like talking like that, but we talk about we've been shifting our conversation about drugs and drug addictions and whatnot. We've been shifting our conversation about it over the years, but the conversation of the homicides and things is pretty much the same.
Correct.
Everybody's afraid.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to go in here. I'm afraid to go in there, but we don't. We've been shifting this other conversation, and I really need to get an understanding. Which of the two should we really be paying the most attention to?
Well, I can tell you this. If you are not involved in drugs, whether using, dealing, selling, whatever it may be, the likelihood of you being involved in violent crime is way, way, way down. So to most people, the way narcotics affect them is as being a victim of a property crime. So you'll see people who, law-abiding citizens who have jobs, who
work every day,
go to work every day, come home at 5 o'clock.
taxes.
Yes, they do the right things. The way they are most affected by it is coming home at 5 o'clock and finding their house broken into because somebody's gone in and stealing stuff.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends who you talk to. People are scared in certain neighborhoods because there's a rash of burglaries. People are concerned in certain areas because there's a rash of shootings. But as I mentioned earlier, if you're not involved in narcotics in some way, shape, or form, your likelihood of being involved in non-fatal shootings, homicides, those kinds of things go way, 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 way down.
Right. Okay. And I'm hoping you're feeling the spirit of my question, because I don't, and by no means, if you're watching this, do I want to minimize the lives lost due to these other, homicides. That's just as tragic as anything else. But at the same time, it seems as though this epidemic, if you will, we need to, have a conversation about that, especially when you consider, as you have pointed out very clearly, that breeds some of these other issues that we're having in our community. So, and I think that's been very clear. Let me get to another point here.
Okay.
Do you feel as though, what drives your workload?
What drives my workload?
Is it petty crime? Is it petty stuff, or is it hardcore stuff? Is it?
Well, we see all kinds, and like I mentioned, that's
what keeps you up at night.
That's what keeps me interested in my job, is because I never know what's going to be the next. One day it may be something petty, but to one person, what is petty, to another person, it's not. So something as simple as neighbors fighting over a property line issue may seem really petty, right?
Yeah.
But what if one of those neighbors has a gun? And what if one of those neighbors gets so upset that they start using the gun?
Yeah.
So one of the things we try to do is focus, especially in our division, community prosecution division, is to try to nip a lot of those little things in the bud. And if you can, maybe you've prevented something bigger from happening.
Right.
So workload depends on the day. Some days it's petty stuff. Some days you got people shooting each other. So, but one day that little thing could lead to the big thing.
Gotcha. What? And this is going to be my last question. What? If you knew when you first got it started in this in 04, you said 04, right?
Yes.
If you knew then what you know now, what would you have told yourself about what to expect in this industry or this line of work?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I think I would probably have told myself, don't get discouraged. There are good people out there that in Indianapolis who want to make this place a better place to be. They want to make it a safer place to be. And regardless of what you may be feeling on that given day, they're out there. And that's what keeps us going, I think, as prosecutors, is all of those people out there who want to make Indianapolis a better place. And it's part of our job to help them do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I don't want to hold you anymore.
Okay.
As you know, I could ask, I keep asking, but I'm just a little past on the northwest side. Anyway, I thank you, Brother Drew. You're now my brother.
All right.
So just get ready for it. And if anything you ever need, you certainly will have my information. We have yours. We want to make sure that y'all don't get discouraged, right? And then we also want to challenge the system,
right,
to make sure that it's working properly,
right, for
those who are investing their trust in the system. I've been through the academies and those things, and it's been very good for me, but I want to also recognize that I'm not the end. There's a lot of people out here who, like me, didn't understand certain things. We understand a grand jury conversation. We understand it was a jury pool and all. We understand that, and so it's important for us to have that two-way dialogue, and not just with the leaders. Some folk call me a leader. I don't think I'm a leader, but we need to talk to the community. We need to make sure that those people who are most impacted by the decisions that are made in offices like yours understand what their rights are and what their expectations should be, so that they're not blindsided or that they have misguided expectations.
Right.
And so this is why I think this is important. And so we'll continue to do that if that's okay with you.
Of course, definitely. That's why we're here.
All right. All right. Well, we thank you so much.
Thanks.
God bless y'all. Jordan's going to hit the music, and we're going to go on out of here. This is Forward Pastor G. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Peace.